Le CERDI organise sa deuxième conférence internationale sur l'environnement et la gestion des ressources naturelles dans les pays en développement et en transition, avec une préconférence sur la thématique migration, environnement et changement climatique. Cette deuxième conférence accueille une centaine de chercheurs du monde entier venant d'Inde, de Chine, du Pakistan, des États-Unis, du Rwanda ou encore d'Afrique du Sud.
So the issue of environmental migrants isn't new in development economics. We have studied shocks, like weather shocks, for a long time. But what's new is really that climate change may induce covariate shocks. So that the weather shocks will be correlated over space, and the traditional methods of insurance that farmers used, for instance, among households, will not work. And one of the important issues I think that we need to study more as economists is the difference between the type of disaster and climate change. So we see that, for instance, sudden onset disasters bring about another form of migration than slow onset environmental degradation, like soil degradation or water degradation. So earthquakes, hurricanes, they destroy capital, decrease households' wealth, and imply that people cannot migrate. Although they wish to migrate, they cannot do it because they will be constrained. Whereas in other forms of climatic change, we will see labor migration. Households will decide to send a migrant to react exposed to a shock, or even ex ante in anticipation. So that's a very important distinction that economists could study, anticipated versus unanticipated shocks. And we could also do more empirical work. I have surveyed in the conference some of the empirical work on this issue, but we often do a very bad match between the spatial data and the household survey data we have, because there are very few projects and surveys that are designed to really measure environmental migration. So we have to make use of household surveys designed in development economics for other purposes. So the migration questions aren't there. So we really need to do more, get more data and field work where we can also get the spatially finely disaggregated data to really match the environmental shock with the household's decision over time.
One of the big problems with climate change is that the benefits and the costs are very unevenly distributed over the globe. And this makes it very difficult to find an agreement between all the countries that are involved. And in fact, all countries are involved in climate change because they all cause climate change and they all have benefits and costs from it. It turns out from game theory that it's very difficult to find large coalitions to combat climate change, and actually most economists are quite pessimistic about reaching an agreement. What I think is what we should do at least is to try to get rid of all kinds of subsidies on polluting fossil fuels, namely fossil fuels that emit by definition almost so much CO2 in the atmosphere, which is causing climate change. Many of these fossil fuels are highly subsidized also in developing as well as in developed countries, and we should immediately abolish them. Then economists are advocates of imposing taxation on fossil fuels instead of subsidization. And the problem is that it might not be appropriate to impose the same type of tax to all fossil fuels in all regions of the world. So there should be differentiation of this taxation according to the stage of development of each of these economies. But still, there's a difficult task before us.
I think the problem of groundwater extraction is a huge issue in developing countries because on the one hand, governments want increased food production, and they also want small farmers to survive in today's very competitive agricultural markets. On the other hand, the issue is if every farmer extracts water and uses a lot of it and benefits from the fact that inputs like electricity and diesel are not priced at their market prices, then there will be depletion and issues with long-run water scarcity. So governments have a huge challenge because they need to tax the creation of new wells and extraction of groundwater resources, especially in regions where the water table is depleting rapidly. Secondly, they need to make sure that these farming communities are still getting water and are able to use groundwater to the most in the most efficient use. So there are different mechanisms being considered. One is to tax electricity, or maybe to make sure that farmers receive reliable electricity, but they pay high fixed costs, because farmers do not like the idea of metered electricity prices. So that's one option. The second one is to make diesel more expensive so that farmers can actually pay the cost of using these inputs in extraction. So the hope is that at least in regions where the water table is shrinking, there will be less water use, and agriculture will shift out of those regions into areas where the groundwater problem is not that serious.